Okay, let's unpack this. You've sent us a really interesting stack of sources.
Yeah, quite a mix. We've got a Reddit discussion, some insights from the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, PNAS Journal too.
Right, and a report on emerging tech risks.
Exactly.
So our mission, really, in this deep dive is to pull out the core arguments, the insights about human extinction, societal collapse. Basically, what are the odds?
Looking at the threats and, importantly, the counterpoints raised in these materials,
Yeah.
it gets pretty fascinating when you put them together.
It really does. And they cover such a range, don't they? From huge cosmic timescales.
Right down to the immediate human-made dangers we're facing, well, right now.
Mm.
Exploring things like leaving Earth eventually, but also how societies break down.
And how they adapt, too, surprisingly.
Yeah, that's key. So, starting with that Reddit thread you mentioned.
Right. The extinction argument there, a big part of it seems to be this idea that we're basically trapped here on Earth.
Uh-huh. The user points to the sheer vastness of space,
Yeah.
the distance to anywhere actually habitable.
And the massive engineering needed for terraforming or, interstellar travel. Nursery ships taking thousands of years, it feels.
Impossible, at least currently.
Yeah, currently. And there's no real big push happening, is there?
Well, and that's where the pushback comes in. Even in that same thread, people saying, hang on.
You can't judge the future by today's tech.
Exactly, like asking someone from the Stone Age about flying to the moon. It seems absurd from their viewpoint.
So our long-term survival might actually hinge on stuff we haven't even dreamed up yet.
Could be. Domes on Mars, self-sufficient colonies evolving slowly, maybe some totally new propulsion. Things we can't conceive of now.
That technological optimism, it's a powerful counterpoint.
Right.
Because statistically,
The 99.9% extinction rate for species over history. It's a sobering number.
but no other species had our kind of tech, our ability to adapt so fast.
Precisely. So the real debate becomes, can our ingenuity actually outrun the threats? Both the external ones and, maybe more importantly, the ones we create ourselves.
Which kind of brings us neatly to societal collapse right here on Earth, the PNAS journal piece. How does it define that?
It talks about a significant loss of societal complexity, losing the capacity to maintain essential functions.
Like government security, basic needs?
Yeah. And it's not always sudden, like a movie. It can be a process, a decline over time.
Okay. And they talk about different scales, like
Yeah.
local versus global.
Right. They mention potential local triggers, maybe like climate stress, possibly feeding into the Syrian conflict, as one example discussed, but also broader breakdowns, even a potential global collapse where, complex states mostly disappear.
And the key seems to be these cascading effects, one thing triggering another.
Yes, exactly. That interconnectedness is crucial. Climate change makes resources scarcer. That fuels political instability, which weakens government, which means services break down. It's a feedback loop.
You see that historically too, right? With things like plagues.
Absolutely. The sources mention the Antonine Plague, the Black Death. These weren't just about death tolls.
They had labor, trade, governance.
Right, sometimes weakening empires critically. And there are other factors too, like major economic issues, persistent unemployment, or this concept of declining energy return on investment, EROI.
Meaning it takes more energy just to get energy.
Yeah, making the whole system less efficient, potentially eroding the foundations.
But, and this feels important, the sources also highlight that collapse isn't always the end of the story, is it?
Not at all. Historically, it often didn't mean extinction or everyone going back to caves. It meant huge shifts, yes, but sometimes it cleared the way for new structures.
Or even pushed innovation, like labor shortages after the Black Death.
Precisely. That PNAS paper really stresses that you have to study adaptation and resilience alongside collapse. Go hand in hand.
Okay, so let's connect this to some of the more immediate worries. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists' Doomsday Clock comes up.
Yeah, and it's currently at 89 seconds to midnight. That's the closest it's ever been.
And it's not just nuclear war anymore.
No, that's still a huge factor, obviously. But the clock reflects this convergence of risks: nuclear threats, climate change, biological threats, pandemics, for example, and these rapidly advancing technologies.
Like AI, which is mentioned in that emerging tech risk report.
Exactly. Companies see the potential, of course, but they're also flagging significant dangers right now.
Such as?
Things like algorithmic bias, AI making unfair decisions because of bad data. Big worries about data security, and just the fundamental challenge of keeping effective human oversight.
These aren't sci-fi problems, then. They're current headaches for these companies.
They really are. Stuff they're actively grappling with.
So if we try and bring all this together, what's the picture these sources paint? It feels like our long-term survival probability isn't just about escaping Earth someday.
No, we're just about riding out historical cycles. It seems heavily shaped by how we manage these really complex, interconnected threats right now.
The things moving that doomsday clock.
Yeah, the risks from our own tech, our ability or inability to prevent these cascading failures we talked about, building resilience.
So what does this all mean for you listening? We've looked at, well, the deep uncertainties of being stuck on one planet versus maybe our unique potential to engineer our way out eventually.
We've seen societal collapse not just as sudden doom, but as this complex process driven by interconnected factors,
Yeah.
but also alongside this human track record of adapting, being resilient.
And we've touched on those immediate human-controlled dangers, the doomsday clock stuff, the risks coming with powerful new tech like AI.
Yeah, this dive into your sources shows, I think, a real tension. Significant, profound threats on one side.
And this demonstrated human capacity for ingenuity and adaptation on the other. It definitely raises a big question.
Hmm.
As you weigh all this, the cosmic isolation, the historical cycles, the immediate dangers, our own cleverness, where do you think the balance lies? Which factors weigh heaviest on that scale of humanity's long-term probability?